August 1945. The war had ended, but peace did not arrive all at once. The air was filled with silence and disbelief. Japan's surrender had shattered an empire, and from its ruins emerged thousands of people, soldiers, nurses, clerks, and civilians, lost and waiting to be claimed by fate. Among them was Aiko Tanaka, a 24-year-old military nurse who had served in the Philippines. She stood in a crumbling hospital, bandaging the arm of a child when the soldiers arrived. Their voices were foreign, their faces unreadable. Orders were given through interpreters. The women were told they would be transferred to the custody of the Americans. Aiko's hands trembled. America, the word itself carried weight. For years, propaganda posters had painted Americans as devils, tall, brutal, and merciless. Mothers whispered to their children that the enemy would burn villages and take prisoners as slaves. Now, as she packed her few belongings, a comb, a photograph of her brother, a small notebook, she wondered if she would ever see Japan again. The women whispered among themselves as they were marched toward the port. "They'll kill us when we arrive," one said. "No," another answered softly. "They'll make us work in their factories." The harbor was lined with damaged ships. The ocean stretched endlessly, gray and cold beneath the morning sun. Aiko and dozens of other women were loaded onto a transport vessel. The doors clanged shut. The engine roared. Their homeland began to fade into mist. Inside the dim cargo hold, the women huddled together. Some prayed. Others sat in silence. The air was heavy with fear and salt. Aiko opened her notebook and wrote, "We are going to the land of the giants. I do not know if we will return." Days passed. The sea was merciless. The women tried to keep track of time, marking each sunset with scratches on the wall. Occasionally, the ship's crew offered them bread or soup. The food was strange but filling. At night, they heard laughter from above deck, American voices, deep and unfamiliar. One evening, Aiko crept up a stairwell and peeked through a small window. She caught her first clear glimpse of an American soldier, tall, broad-shouldered, his hair shining in the sunset. He leaned against the railing, smoking, gazing at the horizon with calm eyes. There was no hatred in his face, only exhaustion. She stepped back, confused. "He doesn't look like a demon," she whispered. Another nurse, Keiko, laughed softly. "Maybe they lied to us." Aiko shook her head. "No, maybe they just didn't know." The voyage lasted nearly 3 weeks. When land finally appeared, a murmur spread through the ship. The women crowded to the windows, staring at the distant coastline. America, wide, green, and impossibly calm. The port bustled with soldiers and trucks. The sun was bright, the air thick with new smells, diesel, coffee, and salt. As the women disembarked, they shielded their eyes. Then they saw them clearly for the first time, rows of tall, clean-shaven men in crisp uniforms. Some had light hair and pale eyes. Others smiled politely and helped them down the ramp. The Japanese women froze in place. For years, they had been told these men were beasts. Yet here they stood, extending gloved hands, offering water and soft-spoken greetings. Aiko hesitated, then accepted a cup of water from one of the soldiers. He nodded once and said slowly, "Welcome, you are safe now." His accent was heavy, but his tone gentle. She blinked, unable to answer. Safe? The word felt foreign, almost unreal. As they were led into waiting trucks, she looked around in silent wonder. The streets were wide, the houses untouched by war. Children laughed from porches. The sky itself seemed larger. Inside the truck, Keiko leaned close and whispered, "They're so tall and so handsome." The women giggled nervously, the first sound of laughter since their capture. Aiko smiled faintly but said nothing. She watched through the slats as the convoy drove inland. The fear in her heart was slowly being replaced by curiosity. Her voice returns as narration. "They were nothing like what we imagined. They were not demons, not monsters, not gods. Just men, tall, strong, and impossibly gentle. And for the first time, I wondered if we had ever really understood our enemy at all." The trucks disappeared down the dusty road, carrying the women toward a new and uncertain chapter of their lives. The screen fades to black. The trucks rolled through miles of open countryside. The Japanese women sat in silence, their eyes wide, their bodies swaying with each turn of the wheels. For many, it was the first time seeing a land untouched by war. The roads were smooth. The trees stood tall and green. The houses were whole. It felt like another world. Aiko sat near the back, clutching her small notebook. Through the gaps in the wooden slats, she caught glimpses of American families watching the convoy pass. Men in clean shirts, women waving from porches, children with bright eyes. No ruins, no smoke, no hunger. Just life continuing as if the war had never existed. Her heart felt heavy and light all at once. How could such peace exist, she thought, while our cities lie in ashes? By noon, they reached the camp. It wasn't what she expected. She had imagined iron fences, barking guards, and dark cells. Instead, rows of wooden barracks stood among open fields. The barbed wire was there, yes, but beyond it she could see fruit trees and even a baseball diamond. An American officer greeted them at the gate. He spoke through an interpreter. "You are prisoners of war," he said, "but you will be treated according to the laws of the Geneva Convention. You will be given food, clothing, and medical care. You are safe here." The women bowed uncertainly. None of them quite believed it yet. Inside the camp, the routine began. Each woman received a cot, a blanket, and a small wooden chest. The first meal was strange: bread, meat, and something sweet and fizzy in glass bottles. An American sergeant handed Aiko a Coca-Cola. She turned it over, suspicious, watching the bubbles rise. "Drink," he said with a grin. "It's good." She hesitated, then took a sip. Her eyes widened. "Sweet," she whispered, "and cold like America itself." The women laughed softly. For the first time since capture, the tension began to melt. Days passed. The camp followed a rhythm. Morning roll call, meals, chores, rest. The Americans encouraged them to attend English lessons and sewing workshops. Some of the women resisted at first, unwilling to learn the language of the enemy. But others, Aiko among them, were curious. In the classroom, they practiced simple words. Hello, thank you, good morning. The American teacher, a young woman named Ellen, spoke slowly, smiling often. She taught them phrases by acting them out, and soon the room filled with laughter. Outside, Aiko noticed something else that astonished her. American women worked beside men, driving trucks, delivering supplies, giving orders without fear or apology. It was a world far removed from the quiet obedience she had known in Japan. One afternoon, Aiko asked Ellen through an interpreter, "Your husband allows you to work?" Ellen laughed. "My husband? I don't have one. I work because I want to." The answer stunned her. That night, Aiko wrote in her notebook, "In Japan, a woman is her father's daughter, her husband's wife, her son's mother. Here, she belongs to herself." Perhaps that is why they seemed to walk taller. The Americans were careful and respectful, though curiosity existed on both sides. The guards were young, many barely older than the prisoners. When they spoke, their voices carried warmth rather than command. One evening, Aiko and Keiko were sweeping near the barracks when a group of soldiers began playing baseball in the nearby field. The women stopped to watch. The men were tall, laughing as they ran the bases, their uniforms bright against the setting sun. Aiko felt something she couldn't name, a quiet admiration. "They are strong," she murmured, "but not cruel. They smile even in victory." Keiko giggled. "And look how handsome they are. I never saw men like that before." Aiko looked away quickly, embarrassed by her own smile. The days grew longer. The fear faded. Small moments began to replace suspicion. The exchange of flour over the fence, the sharing of a song, the discovery that laughter sounded the same in any language. At night, as the camp lights flickered, Aiko lay awake listening to the hum of crickets. She thought of home, her mother in Kyoto, her brother who never returned from the front. Yet here, surrounded by strangers who should have been her enemies, she felt something unexpected. Calm. "They are not like what we were told," she wrote. "They live without hate. They live with freedom. Perhaps that is their greatest strength." One Sunday morning, the guards invited the women to watch a baseball game. They stood near the fence, shading their eyes from the sun. The crack of the bat echoed across the field. The crowd cheered. Aiko clapped instinctively, forgetting herself. A nearby soldier turned, smiling. "You like baseball?" he asked slowly, pointing to the field. Aiko hesitated, then nodded shyly. "Yes, very fun." He laughed. "Good. America's favorite game." For a moment, the war felt like a distant memory. The barbed wire between them seemed thinner, almost invisible. As the sun set, the women walked back to their barracks. The air smelled of dust and grass. Aiko looked once more toward the American camp. The men were still laughing, chasing each other across the field. Her voice returns as narration. They were strong, yet gentle. I didn't know strength could look like kindness. Each day my fear faded and something new took its place. Understanding. The camera pans up to the sky, fading from orange to deep blue as night falls over the camp. Weeks turn to months. The camp doctor, a calm man in his 30s, treated the women's wounds with patience. Aiko sat on the medical cot, watching his careful hands. "For the first time," she said softly, "I wondered, who had we really been fighting?" Friendships bloomed between prisoners and guards. They shared stories, small gifts, music. One evening, the doctor played a harmonica, and Aiko listened, eyes closed. They exchanged words in broken English and Japanese, laughing at each mistake. Beneath the surface, there was a quiet connection, respect, curiosity, and something unspoken. In her diary that night, Aiko wrote, "They were not the demons from our propaganda. They were men, tall, handsome, and painfully human." Months had passed since Aiko and the other Japanese women first arrived in America. Seasons shifted quietly beyond the barbed wire, and the once fearful captives had become almost like residents. Still watched, still foreign, but no longer afraid. Yet even peace has an ending. One autumn morning, a notice came to the camp gates. The war trials are ending. Repatriation begins. The announcement stirred a mix of emotions. Some women wept with relief, longing for home. Others hesitated, uncertain of what home meant anymore. Aiko stood by the window of the infirmary, watching the wind sweep through the fields. The same fields where she had once watched the Americans play baseball now stood empty. Ellen, the American teacher, found her sitting there, hands clasped tightly in her lap. "You'll see your family again," Ellen said softly. "That's good news." Aiko nodded but didn't smile. "Yes, but I feel I am no longer the same person they knew." Ellen placed a hand on her shoulder. "War changes everyone, Aiko. The best thing you can take home is what you learned here." 2 days later, the camp prepared for departure. The women folded their few belongings. Small tokens of their time, notebooks, photos, scraps of English words scribbled on paper. As they lined up for inspection, Aiko's eyes searched for one face. She found him near the infirmary door, the American doctor who had treated her and taught her that kindness could exist even between enemies. He walked toward her, holding a small envelope. "This is for you," he said simply. Inside was a postcard, a photograph of a California field under a wide blue sky. On the back, a single line, "The world is larger than the war that tried to divide it." Aiko bowed deeply, unable to speak. When she looked up, his expression was calm, but heavy with unspoken words. He raised his hand slightly, a quiet farewell, and she turned away before her tears could fall. The next morning, the women were loaded onto trucks bound for port. The sun had just begun to rise, bathing the landscape in pale light. The American guard saluted as the convoy rolled out. The women sat in silence, their faces half lit by dawn. From the back of the truck, Aiko looked out through the slats and saw the camp fading in the distance. The fences, the barracks, the baseball field, the people who had once been her enemies and were now part of her memory. Her voice came softly over the scene. "They treated us not as enemies, but as people." In their eyes, I saw something we had lost, the ability to forgive. The ship ride home was quiet. No songs, no chatter, only the rhythm of waves and the creak of metal. The sea that had once carried them into fear now carried them back toward uncertainty. When Japan's coastline came into view, the women pressed the rails. Smoke still rose from the cities. The docks were crowded with families searching for faces they feared were gone forever. Aiko stepped off the ship, clutching her small bag and the postcard inside. Tokyo was unrecognizable. Streets broken, buildings burned, silence everywhere. She found her mother in a small home on the outskirts, her face thin and tired but her eyes bright with disbelief. They embraced wordlessly, both shaking. That night, as they shared a bowl of rice, her mother asked, "Were they cruel to you?" Aiko looked down at her hands. "No, they were kind." Her mother frowned slightly, puzzled. "Kind? To prisoners?" "Yes," Aiko whispered. "They were not what we were told. They have hearts, just like us." Her mother said nothing more, but her silence carried both confusion and sadness. In the weeks that followed, neighbors whispered. Some avoided the returned women entirely. They called them America's girls, accusing them of forgetting their honor. Aiko endured the stares quietly. She worked at a small clinic, using what she had learned in the POW camp. Her English helped treat the rare foreign visitor or wounded veteran. But in her heart, she carried two worlds, one burned by war, the other illuminated by compassion. One afternoon, she stood at the harbor where the American ships had once docked. The sea wind brushed against her hair. She took out the postcard, its edges now worn, and read the faded line again. "The world is larger than the war that tried to divide it." She turned it over and, in careful Japanese characters, wrote her own word beneath. "And peace begins when we choose to see each other." The waves rolled gently against the pier. The camera lingers on her face. Older, quieter, but with eyes that had seen the truth behind the hatred. Narrator's voice. War builds walls. But beyond those walls, hearts still reach for understanding. In a world divided by fear, a single act of kindness can become the first bridge back to humanity. Aiko gazes at the horizon one last time before turning and walking into the fading light. The scene dissolves into soft film grain as the credits begin to roll.